Hi, everybody, and welcome to this week's Writers Chat. And this, you guys know the routine. This is where we like to gather together as writers, talk about writing for writers and by writers. So we're really, really glad to see everybody here today. And we have a special guest and an important topic about query letters, and writing the right query letter is a very, very essential tool we need to have in our writer's toolbox. So I am very excited to hear about this and some handouts and everything she's going to share with us. So I get to introduce today Tracy Crump. Many of you know Tracy. She's been on here before. She's a friend of Serious Writers for a long, long time on that. And she's a writer and a speaker and an editor. And get the title of her book here. I really like the title of this: Health, Healing, and Wholeness, Devotions of Hope in the Midst of Illness. Doesn't that just make you want to go out and buy that? I mean, if it's not for you, but to share it with someone else, I bet we all know somebody who could use that. Sounds like a book of hope and encouragement. And I think we need a lot of that in the world right now, but especially when you're going through a struggle of an illness in that way. But she also writes a lot of articles and stories. She has been in Focus on the Family, Parent Life, Mature Living, and Women's World, and has published over 100 devotions in Guidepost books and Upper Room and other devotionals. And she is best known, and this is what a lot of people know her for, as least at contributing 22 stories to Chicken Soup for the Soul books. And she's a kind of our resident expert on that. And that's a dream a lot of writers have. That's one of the books I think they like to have. So I bet your query letters might kind of hint at some of that too, what we might get at. And she is, if you take any of the Serious Writers courses, she is one of the top sellers in the Serious Writer family. So we're really, really glad to have her there. And you can subscribe to her monthly newsletter, which features a lot of the story call outs. And I bet Melissa might put her website in the chat there. It is tracycrump.com. So it's a pretty easy one to remember too. So we'll put it there. And are you going to put links to the handouts then, Melissa, too? Yeah, she'll put them in the chat as we go through, and there are 4 different handouts. But you can go, Tracy said you can download those later if you want to, so you don't need them now. So this way we can pay attention. So Tracy, thank you. Thank you so much for being with us. And I'll turn it over to you because I think you're going to do a presentation first, and then we'll have some questions. So I'll turn it over to you. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Jean, for that sweet introduction. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. We do have a PowerPoint. And query letters really are an essential part of publishing, as Jean said. Whether you write fiction or nonfiction, articles or books, it's important to conquer the query letter. And the funny thing is, though, a lot of writers are afraid of query letters. They don't know what to write. They don't know how to present themselves. And really, I can kind of understand, because you sort of think of it as a job interview, only you are competing against thousands of other writers. There we go. So I can understand why people would be afraid of that query letter. But the query letter can actually become your new best friend. They can help you in so many ways. In fact, they can even keep you from wasting your time writing an article or a story or something that a publisher doesn't want. So they can really be a good tool, as I think Jean said earlier, in your toolbox. Now, a lot of times people, especially when they start writing, and I did this, they use what I call the hit and miss theory, where or method is where they write an article and then they try to find a market that it will fit with. Well, the query letter will help you in that way, because as long as you have your idea sharply focused in your mind, you can query first and find out what the publisher or editor is wanting, and then write your article to fit their needs. So that's one way that a query letter can really help you. So let's talk about what exactly is a query letter. Well, it's a sales pitch in which a writer sells his idea, his expertise, and his writing ability in a one-page letter. And I want to stress 1-page letter. Keep that in your mind because I'm going to ask you later, how many pages do you use for a query letter? 1 page. You can send these to magazine editors to sell an article idea, publishers who are, where you will offer your book proposal. A lot of times they will want to see a query letter first, or you can even use it to seek representation from an agent. So they're valuable in all different areas of publishing. Now, just like a job interview, we said it is like a job interview, first impressions count. And the query letter is your first impression on the agent or the editor. So you can think of it as one means of getting your foot in the door. I did a workshop not long ago for the Kentucky Christian Writers Conference, and we talked a little bit about query letters, but we talked about the publishing industry and trying to get your foot in that door. It was called talking about the submission process, and the query letter is an important part of that. But you can make your query letter stand out by following just a few simple rules and tips. Now, we'll focus more today on nonfiction and articles because that's where most of my experience is, but we will mention a little bit about fiction and book query letters too. So we'll have a little bit of everything. All right. First, before you even write your query letter, you're going to do your homework. I know we thought we were done with that in high school or college, but we still have homework to do. You're going to research the publication or the publisher thoroughly before you write your query letter, because you want to show that you understand their audience, what they're looking for. I remember several years ago in the Christian Writers Market Guide, probably a lot of you have used that as a resource. It's a great resource. But one time an editor, they would allow editors to say what they were looking for their publications or their publishing house. And one editor said that they published maybe one fiction book a year. And yet 99% of the submissions they got were for fiction. And he said of the remaining 1%, most were not even in the genre that they were looking for. So it was obvious to him that people were not researching his company. They did not know what he wanted. It's important that we do our homework, that we research the company, and that we focus our query letters to what their needs are. We also want to follow the guidelines carefully. Can't stress this enough. I think in probably every single workshop that I do, no matter what topic, I say, be sure to follow the guidelines. You have it laid out right there for you, what the publisher is looking for, or the editor is looking for. So we want to follow those guidelines to appeal to them, to make them want to publish what we have. I even talk about this in Chicken Soup for the Soul workshops. They have their guidelines right on their website. You will make your work stand out if you simply, you won't imagine how many people do not follow the guidelines. So if you simply follow the guidelines, you've already got a leg up on other people. And Jean, you mentioned something about that the query letter might be helpful in Chicken Soup for the Soul publishing. This is actually one market where it's not. Chicken Soup for the Soul does not take query letters. They want you to submit your story directly on their website through their website form. So that's one thing to keep in mind. That's one place where a query letter won't help you, but there are many other places where they will. So follow the guidelines. They usually will have word counts. Stay within their word count. So if they ask for a 750 to 1,000 word articles, don't pitch them a 1,500 word article. Books the same way. They're going to have certain word counts that they're looking for. Stay within their word counts. That's what a professional does. And we are professionals. I don't care if you've published before or not. You still present yourself as a professional. Also, make sure that they want query letters, just like Chicken Soup for the Soul. They don't. Some magazines don't want query letters. They'd rather see your work first. But a lot of them do. And that's probably where you'll use query letters more than anything, is if you are publishing an article. So, but make sure they want query letters. Do they want it by email or snail mail? Probably, and I'm just making up this figure, 99.9% of people today, or editors today, are going to want submissions by email. But you may find a holdout once in a while who doesn't. I've seen a few that still want it by snail mail. So find out, how do they want their submission? Because if you don't send it the way they want it, they're just going to ignore your submission. You'll have wasted your time. If they want it by email, do they want it attached, or do they want it copy and pasted into the email? That's important to know. Don't send a simultaneous submission unless the guidelines state that they want those. And if you're not familiar with that term, a simultaneous submission is where you're submitting to more than one market at a time. Anytime you do that, you need to make sure that each of those editors will take a simultaneous submission. And then you will also let them know that it is a simultaneous submission. Because if you know anything about rights, and we don't have time to go over those today, but if a publication only takes first rights, you can only sell that to one of the people that you submit to. So you need to make sure that everybody knows that this is a simultaneous submission. So if you're, like I said before, if you follow the guidelines, you're already a step ahead of a lot of other people who are submitting to these publications. Another thing you can do as far as doing your homework is to read the previously published articles or books that this particular house has done, or this particular magazine has done. That gives you a good idea of what kinds of things they're looking for. You can often find those maybe at your library. You might find examples. A lot of times online now, you can find examples of, say, a devotional or an article online. But that's an important thing to do. You may actually have to request a copy. I did that not too awfully long ago for a publication I wanted to write for, and I was really glad I did, because it gave me a feel of that kind of their style of writing and what they looked for. It was a little bit more, I don't know, nostalgic is a good word to use for it. Nostalgic kind of writing that they wanted. So that gave me a good idea. Just looking at the artwork and the pages they had in there gave me a good feel for what they were looking for. So research that publication. Also, you want to make sure you direct your query letter to the appropriate editor. Editors change companies frequently. So even if certain editor is listed in the market guide, you need to go to their website and check and make sure that editor is still there. Sometimes in large publishing or large magazines, they'll have different editors for different sections of the magazine. So you want to make sure you direct it to the appropriate editor. And you may actually even have to call the magazine and make sure that you have the right person that you're directing it to. It's not the end of the world if you direct it to the wrong person. I know one time I had written an article for Parent Life. And so when I wanted to submit an idea or query letter for another article, I contacted that same editor and she was no longer there. So I got a return reply from somebody else. And she was very nice. So we developed a relationship too, and that worked out fine. However, a lot of times the new editor is not going to inherit the old editor's email address. So you may, once again, you may have to do your homework and find out who the new editor is. Be sure to spell that editor's name correctly. That is a pet peeve with a lot of editors. Just a lot of, I know Lynn Johnson, she used to edit the Christian Communicator. Her first name is spelled L-I-N, and she just bugged her to death if people spelled it incorrectly. So make sure you spell their name correctly. Also use the correct address. So Mr., Mrs., Miss, sometimes it's hard to tell with names, whether it's a male or a female. In that case, what you can do is say, like my name, Tracy, could be male or female. You could say, Dear Tracy Crump, instead of Dear Mrs. Crump, if you're not sure. But I think it's important to address them professionally and use those correct addresses that way. So as I said before, if you're in doubt, you can, if it's a large company, call. I wouldn't call small companies and bother the main editor if he's the only one working the whole place, but you can call and find out. So let's stop here. I have a pop quiz for you. How many pages should and type this into the chat and Melissa will tell me, how many pages should a query letter be?
One.
Lots
of ones.
Y'all are good. That's right. One is good. That's right. All right. Now, when we write our query letter, we're going to remember the basics. And this is more in formatting than anything else, but it's important because it shows that you understand how to write a formal letter. And that's what it is. A formal business letter is what a query letter is. So you want to use the correct headings and the correct format for that. So the first thing is, we'll just kind of look at a little example here. If you have a letterhead, then you can use that. If you have it already up at the top where it has all your contact information, be sure all your contact information is on there so that they can contact you. But if you use one, make sure it's small. You don't want it to take up much of your letter because you want to leave as much room as possible for your story idea. So if you use a letterhead, be sure it's a small one. But I always just use a regular business letter like we learned way back in typing class. And this is the basic format where you have the date, you have your contact information. I don't necessarily always put my my phone number on there because I like to save that line for other things. But I would make sure that they have your email address. And then you put their name, and again, be sure you spell it correctly, and their information. Then you're going to have your greeting. Even if you know this person on a first name basis, I would always use a formal greeting. Use their last name because once again, we want to make this professional. And in a business letter, if you don't remember from typing class, you always use a colon after the greeting. A comma is for what we used to call friendly letters. So use a colon after their name. You're going to single space the query letter. Now, when we type up our manuscripts and send those in, we want to double space because we want to make it as easy to read for the editor as possible. But the query letter is going to be single space because once again, you've got to get as much in as possible in a one-page letter. So you want to leave as much room as possible. You're going to single space and then just double space between the paragraphs. Then in the closing, you're going to, of course, have your little closing, sincerely or whatever, best wishes. If you're emailing this, then just skip one line and put your name. That's fine. If by chance you are sending this to someone who wants it by snail mail, wants a printout, then you're going to space down 4 spaces and then put your name. And that leaves you an area where you can sign your name. You're going to actually physically sign the letter. That's just part of a business letter. So I know this sounds all picky, but this is industry standard. This is what the editors are used to seeing, and that's what you want to send them. So let's go back up. So we use the formal business letter, proper headings and margins. I didn't mention this, it's going to be 12 point Times New Roman with 1-inch margins. You're probably all used to that in typing up your manuscripts. Same thing for a business letter. Don't be too personal. I mentioned that. And remember, this is a job interview, so dress up. Now, dress up does not mean use fancy fonts and colored paper, anything like that. Dress up means that you're going to be formal and like you would dress up for a business interview. So always, always, always err on the side of professionalism. You're going to proofread your letter. Spelling errors, typos, grammar mistakes, those are your worst enemy because the editor is going to think if you're not going to take time enough to be careful with your query letter and make it error-free, then what are you going to send him as far as the manuscript goes? They don't want to be correcting a whole lot of errors. Everybody's going to have an error here and there, but they don't want to think that they're going to be spending most of their time correcting your errors. So make your letter as error-free as possible. If you need to send it through your critique group, get somebody else to read it out loud to yourself. That helps in catching things because the ear is less forgiving than the eye. But do whatever you have to do to make that query letter error-free. Once again, how many pages is it? Fingers, 1 page. That's right. Okay. All right, we're going to go on down to the next. Okay, and this is an example. I mentioned the letterheads. This is what I use for my editing. Way too big. I would never use this for a query letter because it would take up way too much space on the page, and that is prime real estate. You want to leave that for the ideas and things that you're going to get across in your letter, and we're going to talk about those in a minute. So, what are the 3 elements of a query letter? You'll have your article or book idea. You'll have your qualifications, and then what I call pertinent data. And we're going to talk about all in detail about these in just a moment. But those are the three basic fundamental elements of a query letter. Now, this may vary slightly from publisher to publisher. And if they say something in their guidelines about they want something different, send them what they ask for. Always send them what they ask for. But if they don't give any instructions, then this is going to be your basic query letter. This will be basically what you send, and it should fulfill probably the requirements of most any publishing house or magazine. Now, one time, though, just give you an example of how they may differ. One time a friend asked me to look over a query letter. She was querying a publishing house about a book she had written. And in that, she mentioned competitive markets. And usually that's in your book proposal. And so I said, I would take that part out because, usually that's not in a query letter, it's in a book proposal. And I said, it'll leave you more room to get your idea across. And she said that this particular publisher had specifically asked that be in the query letter. So she had done her homework. She did what she was supposed to do and found out that this is what this particular publisher wanted. So that's an example of how we need to, how important it is to do our homework and always check those guidelines. But regardless, you want to make sure your query letter is written in a lucid, sharply focused style. And I liked what one agent said. He said, make it a 3C query: clear, concise, and compelling. Clear, concise, and compelling. Those are the main components or things to keep in mind when you write a query letter: clear, concise, and compelling. All right, so how do you do that? Well, you want to start, as I said, with your story idea, or at least get it in there. It doesn't have to be at the very beginning, but you want to be sure you get your idea across clearly. I like to open with a hook. Just like you hook your reader in your book or your article, you want to hook the editor, because after all, he's your first reader. He or she is your first reader, and you want to be sure to hook that editor to make him want to read more. A lot of times, and I can't stress how busy these editors are. They are super busy, and they are just going through query letters and book proposals or whatever, just like that. So you want to hook them. You can catch their attention with a startling statistic or an interesting quote, maybe a personal experience, anecdote, something like that to catch their attention. A lot of times I will start with the first paragraph from my article. And that not only gives hopefully hooks the editor, but also gives them an idea of my writing, provides a little sample of the kind of writing I do. And that gives them an idea of what they can expect from your article. You want to be sure that you give them a clear understanding of your subject and your slant. That's more for nonfiction, of course. You never want to leave the editor hanging. Be sure to let him know, especially if you're writing a book. Now, if this is for a book, especially, don't leave him hanging about the end, even if it's a fiction book. The editor needs to know how it's going to end. So you can use bullet points if you need to, if that's appropriate. A lot of times bullet points will take up a little bit more space, but they're good if you're writing a how-to article, or if you have multiple points that you're going to make in a nonfiction article. Bullet points can kind of help you get those across succinctly. The editor may want to know your takeaway. What's the reader going to take away? What's the benefit to the reader from your article or your book? If it's fiction, in the query letter, you're going to give just a really short plot synopsis with an overview of the main characters and the theme of the book. And that's not going to be easy to do, I realize, in a one-page letter, but you can do it. You can do it. And that's what they're looking for. They want to know that you have a clear idea of where your book is going, and you need to communicate that to the editor. All right, so that's the idea section. The next section, or another section, will be qualifications.
Tracy, we have one question.
Okay.
Rhonda was wondering, is the sample writing portion additional to the one-page query?
No, I'm talking about making it part of the query letter. Now, this is all part of the query, unless they ask, they might ask for, they could ask for a clip. It used to be they would ask for clips, which that's an example of something you have published in the past, maybe something similar. But I don't think most of them ask for those anymore. So no, that's something you have to get across in the same page.
So would you include a link to something that's maybe published online? I mean, if you are supposed to include a sample writing, how do you do that in one page?
Well, a sample doesn't mean a whole article. It just means like a paragraph from what I usually do anyway, is just a paragraph from the article that I'm proposing. So I don't mean a sample from past articles, but a sample
Okay,
from,
thank you for
from what I'm
clarifying that.
proposing. Yeah, okay. Sorry.
Okay, I think people thought that that meant a completely different sample of writing.
No,
Okay.
it's from what you are proposing to them. Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you for clarifying that before you moved on.
Thank you for asking. Thank you, Rhonda.
Sure.
Okay. All right. So anyway, in the qualifications, though, you're going to tell why you are the person to write this article or this book. So it's not the time to be humble. You want to maybe list your background, your expertise, your experience, anything that's pertinent to the particular piece that you are proposing. So say it doesn't mean you have to have a degree in psychology to write about mental illness in your own family. That alone makes you an expert. You've had that experience, and so you can write from that viewpoint. So say for a homeschool article, if I homeschooled for 11 years, that would be pertinent to the query letter. If I was proposing an article on something else, that would not be pertinent. I would not put that in there as far as my qualifications or my experience. Only use qualifications that are pertinent to what you are proposing. So for example, if I am writing a parenting article and I raised 12 kids and I'm still walking and talking, then that would be pertinent to that article. But if not, then don't put that in there. You don't have to put every experience that you've had or every background, bit of background that you have in the query letter, only what is pertinent to what you propose. And let me give you one example of that. A friend of mine wrote an article on diseases that children can get in swimming pools. Her daughter had caught one. And so she did research and she proposed this article. Now, she also has a master's degree in seminary. I'm sure that she did not use that or include that in her query letter because that was not pertinent to this particular article. But if she were writing proposing a Bible study, that would be totally pertinent. So just be sure to keep in mind, only include things that are pertinent to what you are proposing. You can also list other articles or books that you've published. That shows the editor that you write well enough that other editors think you can be published. So that's a good thing to do. But particularly if you've published on this same subject. So if you've published 100 different articles, you're certainly not going to list all 100 articles. But if you've published a couple along the same lines, then you could list those. Or if you've published a book along those lines. So anything that is pertinent to what you are proposing now. If you haven't published, you don't have to say anything. Just don't mention it. Just skip over that. You don't say, I was sure this would be my first publication. I sure wish you would publish it. We don't do that. Don't do that. So you just don't mention it. It's okay. All right. So those are the story idea or the article idea and the qualifications. And then you're also going to include pertinent data. These would be anything that relate to the article or the book that you're proposing. So it would be the title, the word length. And as far as the word length goes, once again, we will have done our homework and we know what word counts they expect, and we will make our word length in that range. The date of availability. If you've already written it, then say it's complete. Say it can be available on request. If not, say if it's an article, you may say I can have it ready in 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, whatever, within date of request. So just kind of let them know, because they a lot of times will look at these articles in the range of, okay, their long-term range as far as what 6 months from now we're going to be publishing. So they want to know when it's going to be available. You're also going to, especially if it's for an article, you're going to tell them any pictures or illustrations, any sidebars, anything else that will enhance the article that you have available. Once again, I would do my homework and make sure that they would accept these things. One publication or a couple of publications I wrote for, they wanted sidebars. In fact, one required you to submit 2 sidebars, one of resources and one of just additional information. And so, so you had to have that ready, or know that you understand that you had to have that available. Some don't publish sidebars. Again, if you've looked at the magazine, you'll get a feel for that. You'll know that. If you need to use a pseudonym, or if it's a simultaneous submission, mention that in the query letter. Those are all things that you will let them know about in the query letter. For a book, you may mention the projected audience, who's going to benefit from your book. If you've already lined up some endorsements, and maybe you've got a couple of really impressive ones, let them know about that. If you've got room to do that, these are just additional things, if you have room, that you can add to it. For a fiction book, you want to let them know if this is a series. Publishers like to know that you're not a one book wonder, so they like series. They want to know that you've got some more coming. So let them know all these things in the query letter. Now you can also it's a good idea to always end with "thank you for your consideration of this query," or something along those lines. Once again, remember that editors are busy people, so we want to thank them for their time. If they've read all the way to the end of your letter, you want to thank them for that. That is a plus, and that means they will probably be interested. And they want to know that you're a polite person that they're going to be working with. So let them know that you are thankful for their time. All right, so we will stop here and see if we have any other questions.
There were some questions about self-promoting when you talk about being the person and God told me to write this.
Yeah.
Do you want to do some reflection about what do you mean about the best way to maybe to communicate why we are the person for this article?
All right, now that's a good question. Well, one way not to do it is to say, God told me to write this book. I've heard editor after editor say they don't want to hear that. And that may be true. And that, in a lot of cases it is true, but that can kind of be interpreted as a little bit of an intimidation tactic. And so we don't want to do that. They said they've even had people say, God told me this is what to write. And so not one word can be changed. Well, right there, they know you are not going to be someone they want to work with. So the best way, I think, is to show your qualification. You know how we show, don't tell, is to show the qualifications, what you've been through. Like I said, if you were writing about mental illness and you have dealt with, you grew up with a mentally ill mother, say, and the things that you learned there. And again, what you can do is you use maybe your opening paragraph that hopefully it's going to be something that's going to really catch their attention. But tell them your qualifications, why, and whether if you do have a master's in seminary, then that would be great. If you are writing something that would be useful for. So I think showing your different qualifications that we talked about, whether it's experience, whether it's education, whatever, I think that's the best way to show them that you are the best person to write this.
Okay, thank you. And then real early on, Kathy asked about resources to find guidelines, and a lot of people gave some answers for her, but I was curious what you would suggest where we would find writers' guidelines.
Okay. Well, I have always loved the Christian Writers Market Guide. I've loved it for years. And the first several copies I had, I marked it up every year and went through and found markets that I thought my writing would fit with. So, but that, once again, that is just the place to start. I remember Sally Stewart who put that together for years. She said that was, once it came out, it was already out of date. Yeah. Because things do change so quickly. So I would start there. A lot of times they'll list some of their guidelines, but start there and they'll have their website address. Go to the website. And sometimes it's tricky to find these on people on the places websites, because sometimes they'll have it up in the bar up at the top, say writer's guidelines or write for us or something like that. Sometimes it'll be under contact. I've found them under contact. I've found them in a lot of different places. So sometimes you really, really have to go and search for them. But usually if they are interested, now some of the bigger ones, I guess they have their own stable of writers and they won't list guidelines on there. But if they're really interested, they'll usually have them somewhere on their website. Once in a while, they'll have something in their, like Woman's World. They take submissions from anyone. And at the bottom of certain sections of their magazine, they'll say, would you like to submit a Circle of Kindness? That's one of their little sections, little short pieces. You can submit at da-da-da-da-da, and they give the editor's name and but anyway, the email address where you can submit those. So sometimes just looking at the magazine will help you find the guidelines. And they don't have a whole lot of guidelines listed, but they'll tell you what they're looking for, basically. And once again, once you've read them, you know what kinds of things that they want.
Right. And then we'll repeat, Rhonda just put it in the chat. We'll repeat what we said at the beginning. Your own monthly newsletter that we can subscribe to has a lot of the call outs and this.
That's right. For the story call outs for anthologies. That's right. It tells you right there. And then of course, Chicken Soup for the Soul, they have the special tab on their website. You go under books and you actually tap on submit your story. And then on that, when it takes you to that page, then one of the tabs is guidelines. And so you can read their guidelines there. But yeah, that's right. All right. Any other questions?
Rhonda or Brandy, you got anything to add before? I know she's going to go on compare some stuff. Do you have something else to ask?
I have nothing so far. I haven't seen any other questions pop up yet. So
Okay.
Yeah, we've covered all the questions in the chat so far, and everything you're presenting so far is excellent information, spot on.
Thank you. Okay, well, let me know if anyone else has a question, but what we're going to do now is we're going to go look at an actual query letter that a friend one time asked me to look over. She had written a book and I had read her book. It's a true story about her life, and she was wanting to start approaching publishers with her book. And so she'd written this query letter and asked me to look over it. And she'd never done one before. I'm not in any way criticizing her, but there were quite a few things that I saw that she needed to change. And I want to kind of compare what she gave me first with what she ended up with. And I want you to see the difference in how it became a 3C query after she worked on it. But first of all, I want to show you this. This was her top. And whenever I do this in person, I hold up the query letter and maybe you can see how many pages is this query letter? 2 pages. How many pages should a query letter be? 1. That's right. So right there was her first mistake. And so we talked about that. But here was her first page. I don't know if you want to type into the chat or what, but what do you see here? According to what we've talked about, what do you see here that you would correct, that you would change?
Well, it takes up a lot of space at the beginning, so I would cut down on the amount of space that it takes at the top of the page by repaginating.
Yeah. Right, exactly. She had a letterhead, and you can't see it as well here on the little snippet that I did, but her letterhead was like 2 inches high. She huge font, and about 2 inches, took up a lot of the page. Right there, she used her prime real estate for just the header. So that was the first thing I told her. What else do you notice?
The header is not aligned correctly. It's in the center. Should be over with the others.
Well, yeah, if you do it like a business letter. Now she did more like a letterhead, so that is usually centered, but yeah, you're right. If it were like a business letter, you would put it over to the left.
Rhonda says that the salutation should say, "Dear Mr. James."
Yes, dear Mr. James with a colon. Yeah, she got a little, yeah, she got a little personal there. So,
and you need to put your information before theirs.
Exactly. Yes. That's right. And then this is how she closed it. She said, she did say, "Thank you for your attention to this letter," which is fine. And then the closing, Then she put all her address and contact information again. I said, you've already put it at the beginning. You don't need it again. So that was another thing we did. All right. Now, I don't want to put anybody to sleep, but I thought I would read what she submitted first, or what she had planned to submit. Maybe I can do it without my glasses. And then what she ended up submitting. So you can kind of see the difference. And so as I read along, kind of think in your own mind how you would change this, how you would maybe make it more concise, how you would cut maybe some things that you could make this fit onto one letter. All right. She said, Dear Andrew, stuffing drawers with stories has been my primary occupation for more than 20 years. About 5 years ago, I finally got them all out, an activity that inspired me to write even more. I don't know that that would inspire an editor, though, to want to publish if you're just, writing letters. In time, I discovered a central theme flowing through my writing. We all stumble from time to time, but God gives us the ability to get back up if we trust him enough to be obedient to him. I know it happened in my own life. This is a premise of, and she gave the title. My book has been many years in the making because time and again, I would catch myself thinking, who am I? Why would anyone want to read about my life? I'll just stop here and say, I don't think I would say that because you're giving the editor the idea that nobody's going to want to read about your life. So I wouldn't say anything negative about what you're writing. Then one day it hit me. The collective message of my writing just might be inspirational to others, particularly women. I've had an incredibly diverse life and have learned a great deal from the roller coaster-like ride has given me. Perhaps by sharing what my life experience has taught me, it would be possible to encourage other women to learn from their own. Now, she did a lot of good things here. She did say this is basically the takeaway of her book. It's going to help women, encourage women to learn from their own lives and their own mistakes. So she gave the title. She said, traces the 30-year journey God allowed me to take away from him because he knew it was the only way I would ever find my way back to him. It is a hard-won, heartfelt testimony of God's power to transform a life, half spent with restless longing into one blessed with acceptance and grace. I love the way she words things. The story is told through a series of short stories, poems, and essays with connecting narrative. On average, each of the 11 chapters has 3 or more entries. Chapter 5 contains the lyrics of a one-woman musical review, and she gives a title. As a child, and then she goes on, says, as a child, I loved to learn the Lord. I love the Lord, yet I let go of him as a young adult. It took me 30 years of stumbling from my native Missouri through Illinois, Colorado, Kansas, Northern California, Arizona, New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Southern California, Georgia, and Florida to finally find my way back to God. When I did, I finally found home. It's my hope that this book will resonate in the hearts and minds of women to encourage them to depend on God as they press on through whatever obstacles they may face. And again, she's talking about the takeaway, but you don't need to talk about it twice. Once is enough. The simple truth is, it is never too late to make things right with the one who created us. It is my fondest hope that this book may help lead many to or back to God's saving grace. And then she said the manuscript is nearing completion with approximate word count, and she tells about that, tells about things couple of things she's published. She said, from a marketing standpoint, I am an accomplished speaker and trained actress and would be eager to participate in marketing this book in a variety of venues. And she mentioned some things there. And while I'm still a novice at writing query letters, again, don't criticize yourself in a query letter. God has truly gifted and equipped me to be a storyteller, specifically to tell this story. I would sincerely appreciate if you would take a look at some of my writing from in the title. And she said, thank you for your attention to this letter. All right. Has anybody typed in anything they saw there? I didn't say you could do that, but all right, do you want to mention them, Melissa?
Oh, it's lots of them. Many reading the rambling and repeating of the same thing over and over, too many details. One I kind of got a kick out of, this is not a counseling session. a lot of that.
Okay. Very true. Very true. And like I say, I'm not criticizing her. She allows me to use this, not criticizing her at all, but it's how we as writers can start running down that rabbit trail, and we want to tell everything, and we can't do that in query letter. We just cannot. It has to be one page. It has to be succinct, has to be clear, concise, and compelling. So, all right, here's what we ended up with. I don't know if I have yeah, here, she redid her header. Now this was actually header. It was at the top and center, and it doesn't show that way on here, but then she redid how she addressed him and everything. She went on to say this: we all stumble from time to time, but it is our ability to get back up that determines how rich our life experience will be. This idea is at the heart of, and she gives the title, which traces the journey God allowed me to take away from him because he knew it was the only way I would ever find my way back. This hard-won, heartfelt story is a testimony of God's power to transform a life half spent with restless longing into one blessed with acceptance and grace. My journey took over 30 years and 34 moves. She didn't, praise God, she did not repeat every state she'd been through. She didn't have to do that. 34 moves tells it right there. Through 12 states, well, she says 12 states, as I lit out from, I love that, as I lit out from a Missouri cornfield to charge across the country, a venture fueled by the magical checkbook of a sizable inheritance. She didn't even mention that in the first query letter. That's, I think, is important. I packed only big dreams, but saw them turn into nightmares as I found myself grappling with drugs, destructive relationships, an unsuccessful bid for Broadway stardom, an alcoholic marriage, manic depression, a suicide attempt, a second marriage and divorce, bankruptcy, serious illness, and verbal abuse. Now, that may be a long list, but I had read her book and I knew that's what her book was about. She didn't get that across in her first query letter. She didn't even tell the editor what her book was going to be about. And this was what her book was about. So I think it was important, maybe not list every single one of them, but it was important for her to list some of the things that she was going to address in the book. This book will resonate in the hearts and minds of women to encourage them to press on and through whatever obstacles they may face. God is bigger than any storm. He's also a gentleman who waits patiently for us to turn to him. The truth is, it is never too late to make things right with the one who created us. When we do, he gives us his grace. And then she goes on to tell the details about the manuscript and what she's published before. Now, she does mention in here, and I don't know that I agree with this, she said that she thought the would translate well to the screen. I think I would work on getting the book published first before I talk about movies, but I don't know. That might appeal to some editors, who knows? And then she says, please let me know if you would like to see the book proposal, which that is what you're offering to a publisher when you send a query letter, is you're offering the book proposal. Now, once in a while, they may just want to see your manuscript, but usually the query letter sells the book proposal sells the book. And then she says, thank you for consideration of this query letter, and signs it. So do you see how much improved her query letter was after she pared it down, made sure that she had all the important information in there, and she just made it one page. Yay, one page. All right.
I'm really thinking, a lot of times we meet up with the editors at writers conferences with our one sheets.
Mhm.
But I think the practice, some of the tips that you told us would be very good to, even if we don't present it to anybody, to go through, because it would give us clear idea, compelling idea, the right words to verbalize when we're nervous.
Yes.
An editor to say,
Yes.
this is what my book, that kind of that one sentence, or that short paragraph, because they tell you keep it short when you tell them. But the guidance for query letters is very similar to verbally talking
Mhm.
about our book idea or an article idea with an editor at a conference.
Yes. Good point. Good point, Jean. That's right.
Yeah.
Well, and it can help us polish and submit. That's right. And so that's my last slide there, is we want to polish that query letter and submit it. But it can help us in other ways too. You're absolutely right. So if you follow these rules, you'll hit more than you miss with a query letter.
Right. Well, let's invite everybody kind of back on and see what other additional questions that we have. And Patricia is saying that that's exactly what she did. She created a book proposal and a query letter for her first conference, long before I finished my novel, just to see what I needed to learn. And I think that's a very, very good point.
Yeah, it is. It is.
It would be a way to clarify for us.
Yes. It solidifies the picture in your mind, and that way you can present it more clearly to someone else.
It would also give you bullet points and ideas for if you created a one sheet, and we've talked about the one sheets before too. on that and stuff. So I think that might work, would give me clarification. You want to talk about some of the handouts that you included that we put on the
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, this one is kind of a little bit of an outline of what we talked about today and the different, the main elements of a query letter. But I also included two sample query letters. One is the one for an article. I actually did send to Focus on the Family, and it did result in their purchasing the article, wanting to see it and purchasing it. So that was a true one. The other one is totally fiction. It's for a fiction book, and Angelina Jolie is not going to endorse anything I write, and I do not have all those credentials. But anyway, it kind of shows you the sorts of things that you can include and that you actually can get into one page. So it's just an example, but that's the kind of thing that you can do.
And they're in the file section on our writers chat members page, right? There's four handles. I'm looking at Melissa.
I think the other one is other do's and don'ts, and I don't even have those in front of me, so I don't remember what I put in there.
I can have that one right there. You know,
all right. I
And
may have those on here. Nope, don't even have it.
Right.
So
it's a lot of the stuff that but it's a good one sheet tip thing to look over when you edit it and polish it.
Yeah.
All that. You want to talk a little bit any more about simultaneous submissions, you know, that some guidelines, some tips on that?
Okay. Well, the main thing is to make sure that anybody you send a simultaneous submission to will accept them. What you're doing is you're saying one of you can have this article. If it's for first rights, you're saying one of you can have this, but not all, not all of you. And the editors understand what a simultaneous submission is. So sometimes it'll kind of prompt them to get on the ball if they like what you've written and say, oh yeah, I want it first. But at any rate, they need to know, because if an editor has worked, really gone through, talked to, maybe other editors, do we want to publish this? Oh yeah, it would fit well here. And then they find out you've sold it somewhere else and you didn't tell them that you were submitting it as a simultaneous submission, they're going to be angry. So you need to make sure that that's what they want. Chicken Soup for the Soul is an example that they will take simultaneous submissions, but they want to know. They say in there they want to know. So you can, as I said, if it's for first rights, you can only sell it one time. Now there are other one time we can do something about rights one time on here if you want to, because I've got a workshop on writers' rights, that talks about the different kinds of rights and what you're selling and how to go about it. So, but yeah, that's what a simultaneous submission is. And you can do this with books too. It's hard to spend 3 to 6 months talking to one publishing company, and then they say, well, we don't want it, thanks. And then you've got to go on to somebody else. So once again, make sure that they'll take simultaneous submissions, but you can send to different, and you want to slant your query letter to that particular publisher. Okay. You're not doing this mass mail out. Okay. You want to slant it. And I know it's more work, but you want to make them feel like you understand their publishing needs and that your book is going to fit with what they want.
And slant our qualifications for that, like you illustrated, I'm a mother of 12 kids or whatever. That idea was and survived.
Right.
That would sell more than to sit there. I have this doctorate degree and that.
Right. They're probably not going to care.
We got a few minutes. Other questions about people that are here. I don't want to be the only one asking questions. You have questions right away?
I don't know, there's been a lot of great information. I think you covered so much and you covered it so well that I don't think that there's a whole lot of questions to have.
Let me ask one then. How many of you have written query letters?
Yeah.
Okay, I see several. Okay, well, good. So how did they come out? Were they successful? Did you get a request for that article or that book or
I
the
don't
proposal?
remember.
I've
I
done
used to write mine a long time ago.
Right. I'm the
Mine-
same as Brandy.
Mine's been a
Mine was
number.
old.
Yeah, mine's been a number of years too, which though it makes me want to get back into it. And so this has been a polishing of this tool and all that, because I would have put a comma instead of a colon. For example, on that. And there was some conversation in the chat about fonts and stuff. And the
Okay,
size of fonts that somebody said that we could make it a little bit smaller and you could squeeze more onto the page. And
right. But you don't want to do that because you
yeah,
want the,
editors-
they have to be able to read it, and they read so much stuff, their eyes get tired. So, and they're like us, they're probably needing their reading glasses. So you need to still make it 12-point font. I know it's tempting. And to
have
make the margins go all the way to the
And
edge.
don't shrink the line spacing to tiny, because editors are going to notice that too.
Yeah,
You just
that's
need
right.
to learn brevity.
That's
I
right.
have I have a question, Tracy.
Mhm,
Do
mhm.
you think it's still more effective to have an agent who's shopping around? Or I guess my big question is, how effective is this kind of cold calling method? It's like you've never met someone, they don't know you. It just seems to me, I build mountains out of molehills. And to me, it just seems like a big obstacle to get over. Why would they listen to me? And I talk myself out of writing query letters.
Mm. Well, are you talking about just for a book?
Well, for a book, or no, an article,
Or an
it's a
article?
different critter. But,
Okay, yeah,
right now I'm
right.
focused on my books.
Your books, yeah. Well, as we know, a lot of publishing houses will not accept submissions from just general submissions, freelance submissions. They only want it through agents. So in that case, you said something is an agent the better way, I think is what you were saying. And yeah, definitely in that case it is. But there's still possibility, and of course, meeting somebody at a conference and talking to them in person is always better. But you can't go to every conference. You can't meet every editor, or every publisher. So it is possible. Now, I got an agent. The first agent I ever had was through a query letter that I sent, and I had already sent it to several, not hundreds by any means, but I had already sent it to several when she expressed interest. So it can be very, very helpful. I had never met her at a conference or anything before, so it can be successful. As far as publishers, smaller publishing houses, I think it would be absolutely appropriate. The larger ones, of course, they only want to hear from agents. So I don't think there's anything wrong with it, unless they say they don't take query letters. That's once again where you'll do your homework and find out. But yeah, I think it can be very helpful. It's going to still be, more difficult because publishers are, so overloaded now, but it can be successful.
I'd like to add in that it's important to also use the same techniques, and you can use the same techniques for cover letters. They don't exactly include everything that you would use for a query letter,
Right.
but cover letters are important when you're sending off short submissions like flash fiction. You need a cover letter, other things like that. So use the same things, brevity, good fonts, the same formatting for a cover letter, because you don't just want to send off your work without a short little introduction in that cover
Right.
letter. So yeah.
Right. And if it's for something that's been requested through your query letter, then you want to remind them, oh, this is what you requested, or I met you at a conference and you requested da 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 da. So yeah, yes, it's very important. You're right, Brandy.
Or those 3 C's that you shared with us, that could be used in the cover letter just to see
Yes.
clear, compelling, and
Clear,
just-
concise, and compelling. That's
Yep.
right.
Yeah, so
Mhm.
that might be a good thing to wrap up here on that note, on that way. on that. Just while we're still recorded, I want to mention next week's Writers Chat. We have our own Patricia Tiffany Moore is going to come in, and she's going to talk about Pinterest and using Pinterest as an author. And watch the Writers Chat webpage, Writers Chat members Facebook page. That's what I'm saying. I hope I'm saying that right. This week, she is going to put some posts up there with tips leading up to next Tuesday. So if you use Pinterest or you want to use Pinterest more as a writer, it's a great marketing tool and stuff. Watch for those posts this week, and it should be an exciting topic. So Tracy, thank you. This was just absolutely wonderful. What a beautiful overview.
Well, thank you for having me. I always enjoy this.
It's just wonderful. So, and we appreciate you taking the time, and we'll invite those of you that are here to stay for our after parties as we finish the recording. And on that, we do have one more question, so we'll add that in just a minute. So we'll finish up, and we'll see you all next week on Writers Chat. Bye, everybody.